Hello and welcome to our second Wednesday afternoon video talk. I hope you enjoyed the first one. Keith and Lorraine certainly kept me interested throughout the talk with the many different record-breaking facts and stories from Suffolk. There were some I didn't know, and I've lived here for 40 years. Thank you to Keith and Lorraine for all the research and for presenting it in such a clear and interesting manner. Today, we are going to begin a series of introducing you to members of our committee, some of whom are new to our committee. First, myself. As I said, I've lived here for 40 years now, moving here after I completed my teacher training. I retired 2 years ago, which is when I joined U3A because of the variety of talks and groups it offered and the opportunity to meet new people. I have 2 daughters who now live in other parts of the country with their partners. I have for the last 13 years been part of Stowmarket Operatic and Dramatic Society, both on stage and behind the scenes, so naturally I enjoy trips to the theatre, particularly musicals. At present I am also chair of Stowmarket Operatic and Dramatic Society, and I have been their secretary and their treasurer in the past. I also enjoy reading, some crafts, and attempt to play golf, and I love seeing new places. I have also had the privilege of helping at the Mix with the vaccination programme since January. That's enough about me. Now on to our next committee member.
Hello, my name is Anne Whedon and I'm your new membership secretary. Many of you may recognise my name, but perhaps not my face. As we cannot meet in person, we thought that by doing this short video of the committee members, it will help you identify us in the future. I retired from working for an accountancy firm in November 2018. After spending a few months trying to decide what I wanted to do in my retirement, I was encouraged by an existing member of Stowmarket U3A to join this group in September 2019. I have not regretted it and look forward to getting involved in more in the future. I am a member of the walking group, which I enjoy, as it is a great way of learning about the Suffolk countryside. For almost 30 years, I lived in Exeter in Devon, but decided to move to Stowmarket in 2007. I am originally from Essex and wanted to move to be closer to my family. My one son, Jonathan, followed me a few years later and now lives in Stowmarket. I love collecting various items, and over many years my teddy bear collection has now grown to almost 300. I also enjoy knitting and have been knitting blankets for premature babies, although at present we are unable to send these to the local hospitals. Let's hope that we can all meet up again very soon. I look forward to meeting you. Now that I know many of your names, it will be good to put the names to the faces. If in the meantime you want any help, please contact me or any other members of the committee. We will be pleased to help you.
Hello, my name is Lorraine, and as the other half of your programme organiser, I'm going to introduce our talk for this month's meeting. Last time we finished our talk in the village of Hoxne, where mention was made of the village sign and the coin that appears at the bottom. This month we stay in Hoxne and indeed remain with coins, because the main section of this meeting is a talk by Tony Diamond on the Hoxne Hoard, the finding of buried treasure in Hoxne dating back to Roman times. Sometimes the sound in Tony's talk varies a little, but it soon corrects itself. If Tony's talk inspires you to want to find out more about life in Britain around the time of the Hoxne Hoard, Keith will be offering a follow-up presentation. Please feel free to watch one or both of the talks. Our first speaker, Tony, lives in Suffolk and introduces himself as a passionate speaker, writer and composer. He gives historical talks and lectures, hoping to share with others his thirst for knowledge, while saving us the many hours of research he undertakes. I'm sure you will enjoy his talk and learn some interesting facts along the way.
Hi everybody, today I'm going to talk to you about the Hoxne Hoard. And here I am on Zoom speaking to you at last. Here we go, the Hoxne Hoard. This is dedicated to Eric Laws, who is a friend of mine, died in 2015. And this is a poem that I made up concerning the Hoxne Hoard. I went fishing locally, up the road not far from me, but it wasn't fish I found, or a hammer on the ground. And I needn't ever say that the big one got away, nor a lie I never told. I'm the man that found the gold. This is the official picture from the British Museum. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning. Well, yes, I would. But in 1992, the first thing I ever heard about the Hoxne Hoard was when my son came home from Hoxne School. And he said, Dad, there's this boy at school, and he said that his father has found a great big load of gold in the ground. And I said, yes, darling, and I'm the king of Romania. But he was right. It actually did take part. That happened at Hoxne near Eye in Suffolk, and that's where it is. It's actually on one corner of what we call Dragon's Green. It's got Skull in the north there, and then Hoxne and Eye is down at the south. That's Hoxne Village in 1992. And in 1992, it looks exactly the same as it does today. This is the Hoxne Swan pub, where many of you may have been and enjoyed a pint or maybe more. And this is just around the corner from there, the Goldbrook Bridge in Hoxne. Now, this is the place where in 870 AD, King Edmund was captured by the Danes. That is the picture of the wedding party going over. He was hiding under the bridge. They saw his spurs in the water and they captured him. Now they took him from that spot and they took him up the road about a half a mile to where there used to be an old oak tree. That is the site of the Hoxne oak tree, and that fell in 1843. That is where they leaned him up against the tree and shot him with arrows. This is a drawing by Brian Whelan, who's a famous East Anglian artist. And this shows King Edmund being shot at that famous tree in Hoxne. The original of that stands in the Lady Chapel of St. Edmundsbury Cathedral, and you can go and see it. It's a wonderful painting, particular to Hoxne. Pure luck, number one. In 2012, I was asked, there's an elderly gentleman, and he needs a lift to the Luncheon Club in Eye in Suffolk. He lives in Hoxne, so off I went to Hoxne to pick him up. Elderly gentleman, about 90 years of age, very deaf, very blind. He said to me on the way there, you don't know who I am, do you, Bert? And I said, no. And he said, I'm the man that found the Hoxne treasure. And I thought, yes, and I'm the king of Romania. But he was telling me the truth, because in 1992, when he retired, he was given a metal detector as a retirement present. At the time, he lived on the edge of Dragon's Green, and a local farmer asked him to use his new metal detector to search for a hammer. Lost. One hammer. Poor condition. Sentimental value only. Eric Laws went looking for a lost hammer. The site of the Hoxne Hoard is actually here. There's Hoxne Village, there's the Swan Public House, and that's about a third of a mile to the actual place where it is. So you can go and see it if you want to. It was a field used for strawberry picking, and it had been since 1946. Eric Laws in a field near Hoxne, 16th November 1992. That day I was mostly looking for the hammer and trying out the metal detector. I went down the field and I hadn't been there that long. Right away, I heard three bleeps not far down. I found what I thought was an old coin in the field, about 6 inches down, and then, a few yards on, another one. And then I found the whole lot, not far down, with lots of old coins and a necklace, and I knew it was a trove. The British Museum said that that trove had been pushing up out of the ground for about 1,500 years or more. I put a few coins in the car and I went home for my tea. I hadn't found the hammer as yet. Because Eric was honest and very sensible, he knew that he had to inform the proper authorities. The next morning he phoned the police and they urged him to tell Suffolk County Council and the Ipswich Museum. Suffolk County Council indignantly refused to become involved in what they perceived to be a property dispute. This is the responsibility of the person or persons who leased the field. It's got nothing to do with us, especially if the police are involved. Why don't you go and bother the archaeology people at Ipswich Museum? Well, Ipswich Museum had a very different view. They had held 5 digs in that field since 1918. It was known to be the site of a Roman burial ground. Ipswich Museum asked the police to secure the area while the British Museum employees hurried to Hoxne. Suffolk police arrived very quickly and 2 officers remained on site for the next 24 hours. Pure luck number 2. One of the bobbies lives in the same street as me. I met the other one in Bungay while I was doing this talk. Eric Laws had unearthed the largest trove of Roman treasure in the entire world. Now, the police guarded the site as the archaeologists excavated. Local residents stayed well away, thereby preserving the site. 17th November 1992. There's gold in the muck. Oh, yes, there is. Eric Laws with his metal detector, 19th November 1992. The hoard included hundreds of solid gold coins. The hoard contained thousands of solid silver coins in perfect condition. The hoard contained several priceless artifacts, some of which are unique in the whole world. And the discovery of the Hoxne Hoard exposed glaring faults in the law of the land. These included serious hazards regarding the legal approach to 1, treasure trove, 2, valuation, and 3, treasure title. Hazard number 1, stealing by finding. The assumption in law was that any discovery of treasure on private property by an unregistered company or individual was a mask for theft. This was a catch-22, and it meant that in practice, no fines could be made, not legally anyway. Hazard number 2, assumption of landlord's title. Dating back to King Edward III in 1363, this law assumed that only titled landowners could possess treasure of any kind. Hazard number 3, valuation regulations pertaining to title. In a further catch-22, only registered trading companies could apply for valuation extant title, and therefore no casual person could ever achieve title or valuation of treasure. It meant that in practice, finding a really valuable treasure trove would cause you more trouble than you could possibly imagine. I was just looking for a hammer, But all of the other legal problems pertaining to other finds, especially the Mildenhall treasure, discovered in 1942, resurfaced. This is the plate of Bacchus from the Mildenhall treasure. Who found the Mildenhall treasure? Where did they find it? How did they find it? Why did they find it? Were they looking for it? Was a crime committed? That's what the law said, and these questions could only be settled in coroner's court. How did the treasure get to that location in Hoxne? Well, there may have been a wealthy villa at Skole. If you look at Dragon's Green, up at the top point there is Skole. Now that might have been where there was a wealthy villa. And in the 1990s, this famous Skole dragon was built there by Ben Platts Mills, who was a Suffolk sculptor. A wonderful man he was as well. This is what a Romano-Briton villa might have looked like at the time. And in AD 410, we know that that's roughly the date that the gold went into the ground. Roman rule was breaking down in Britain. Flee for your life could well have been the order of the day. There's somebody come over that hill. They're going to be here in 2 hours, 24 hours, and they're going to, when they leave, you're going to be nothing more than a greasy spot, you and your family, so you better get out fast. And now they may have used a river barge to take that big box of treasure all the way down the river. If you follow it down from Skole, it comes down the river there and goes all the way down to a point very close to where the Hoxne Hoard was found. So that sits up and works as a possibility. Hiding the family treasure could have been very important. And we know that it was a family because of the content of the treasure. It's also 3 miles exactly to Eye, and the sun goes down there over the highest point in Eye. Some of the artifacts, such as several rings and one golden bracelet, are inscribed to the Lady Juliana. Possibly she was a local matriarch. And unquestionably, the original owners of the Hoxne Hoard were rich beyond the dreams of most human beings, having treasure from every part of the Roman Empire amassed over 400 years. What happens now? Well, Eric Laws found the treasure, but all points of judicial propriety must be determined in a court of law. There were many questions to be settled, and it has to be in a coroner's court. Judgment at Lowestoft, hear ye, this court is now in session. Relevant questions. Is it treasure? Is it treasure trove? What's it worth? Everybody wants to know that one. Who owns it? Who gets what? Question 1, is it treasure? Yes, it is. Treasure is defined as gold and or silver. 2, is it treasure trove? Answer, yes, it is treasure trove. Treasure trove is defined as treasure, gold or silver, which has been hidden with the intention of recovering it at a future date. Question 3, what's it worth? Everybody wants to know that, but hang on just a minute. Hang on a cotton-picking minute. What's it worth? Come on. Well, we're going to have to refer that to a special tribunal because that is a very good question. Now, the law as it stood in 1992 said that treasure may only be valued for its metal or bullion weight. Well, that means that a solid gold necklace, 1,800 years old, in perfect condition, is only worth about 20 quid because that's the bullion weight value. And the law of it stood says as well that trading of bullion is highly regulated pertaining to title. Well, now you can see why that should be the case, because basically bullion is the basis of our currency. And that means that any finder of bullion may not trade unless they're registered. And even then, they have to pay heavy commission to traders. So the laws it stood said that all valuations of treasure are subject to paper currency disbursement. And if you know what that means, I'll give you £1. But basically, it means that treasure may never ever be retained as material goods once it's been found. It has to be realized in monetary value at once in any transaction. So you have to say what it's valued at in money terms. And once you've done that, that's a transaction. Well, then comes along the jolly old taxman. And the law said then that all transactions are subject on completion to immediate taxation at the highest rate. And it means that no honest finder has any incentive to obey the law of the land. Why should you? The size and the purity of the Hoxne Hoard exposed serious deficiencies in the existing valuation process. What's it worth? Come on, we want to know. We want to know. It's been referred to a tribunal, remember? Pure luck, number 3. I was down in Southend. I was talking about chocolate, and I met the chairman of the tribunal in Southend. Ever heard of a village called Hoxne? I chaired a tribunal in the 1990s to establish the value of a Roman hoard found there. Referring only to the bullion weight value of the trove, he told me, their initial finding was the bullion weight was £42,500. Oh, good. But if you look at that, that was actually worth less than 2% of the true value of the trove, and it was rejected immediately by the tribunal as being unfair and improper. You take that money, £42,500, you tax it at source because it's transaction. Now it's worth £25,500, but you have to pay to the brokers as well. So after broker sale, it's worth £17,850. That's not so hot, is it? After bureaucratic legalities, this would have resulted in a valuation of less than 1/400th of the true value of the trove. And that idea was rejected by the tribunal as being unfair and improper. The judges set the full value of the trove to be awarded free of tax and fees. £1,700,000. Now, this is how the special tribunal made their decision, and this was explained to me by the chairman of that tribunal. Who owns it? Who has title? Well, the problem is, under the law in 1992, the landowner may assume full title. But that dates back to 1363, and it actually related to beasts of warren and chase. So if you had a hart, or if you had a pheasant or something like that, dead on the ground, peasant standing over it with an arrow or a knife, what was on the ground belonged to the local landowner. Get off my land, bah! Oh, yes, indeed. But Suffolk County Council were the landowners, and they had leased the field to the farmer who gave permission. And when Eric Laws phoned up Suffolk County Council, they had formally waived all claim to the title. They said they didn't want anything to do with it. And they registered the point with the police at the time. Strictly speaking now, the Treasury, acting for Her Majesty the Queen, might claim full legal title, but hey, I don't like the sound of that. That's what happened in the Mildenhall treasure case, and it left a bad taste in the mouth. Please, nobody. The persons who discovered the Mildenhall treasure, and it was worth £500,000, and they received £1,000 each. If you have 10,000 regulations, you destroy all respect for the law. And the honesty and responsible behavior of Eric Laws exposed these grave flaws in the existing determination of title process. Was he a poacher? No, he wasn't a poacher. Was he a thief? No, he wasn't a thief. The police had been informed immediately. The landowners waived all the title. Mr. Laws had fulfilled all criteria that a good citizen could do, and he'd done that in law. I was just looking for a hammer, is his point of view on the matter. And related comments when respect for the law is paramount. The professionals in the case acted to the highest standards. The police, the professionals who came from Ipswich Museum, and the people who came down from the British Museum. Now, the two Suffolk police officers were commended for doing their duty because they stayed on duty in that field for 24 hours overnight. And they didn't go off duty. And that really mattered when it came to the court case, because a number of other people were trying to pop up then and say, well, actually, we found the Hoxne Hoard treasure, but the police had guarded it all night long, so that couldn't happen. Demonstrable honesty merits reward. So, the most generous and openly fair decision must prevail. The finding of the hammer was the key factor. British Museum employees found another 31 coins. All of them were judged to be part of the trove, and they also found the hammer. That meant that there was independent and irrefutable proof of the fact that Mr. Law's evidence was completely true. That do well, bah, that do well. Because of Eric Law's responsible conduct, the law regarding treasure trove was amended. It means that in some cases, finders keepers may apply. This is the Ringlemere Cup, which was found in Kent in 2002. The man who found it was told, you can have it as it is. You don't have to seek for valuation or anything like that. It's yours. Finders keepers as found. In November 2019, on the other hand, two nighthawkers who concealed this find were jailed for 10 years for concealing it from everybody. And because of Mr. Eric Law's responsible conduct, the law regarding treasure valuation was changed. The Crown now oversees all responsibility for valuation without fear or favour. And because of his responsible conduct, the law regarding treasure title was changed. There's now no assumption of title by the landowner. The British Museum now enacts title for the Crown. It means that the responsible citizen receives Crown valuation in tax-free cash. Eric Laws gets every single penny. £1,700,000. I just have to manage that, but I just have to manage. Eric chose to share the money with the man who lost the hammer. And Ipswich Museum held the very first display of the Hoxne Hoard with the original padlocks. The British Museum presentation opened in 1993 and attracted worldwide acclaim. Oh, say, my dear fellow, I've recently misplaced a hammer at Windsor. Can you help? Because, of course, Prince Charles opened the display. Eric Laws is commended in that display, and as soon as you walk in, that's the first thing that you see. The late Roman treasure from Hoxne was found by Mr. Eric Laws, who reported the find immediately without taking all the objects from the ground. This responsible conduct. Now, that's the important thing, his responsible conduct, because that really did change the law. These are some of the items being assembled for the British Museum display. The Roman coins, golden solidii, 569 pure 24-carat gold coins, 4.5 grams each, as new. Base metal value approximately £15,000. More or less any one of them was worth £15,000. Silver siliquia, or scilia. Now, normal for Norfolk would be this kind of coin, but look at the condition of the ones that were found in the Hoxne Hoard. 14,272 silver siliquia as new, base metal value £16,000. And the Hoxne Hoard contained more Roman coins in perfect condition than existed in any museum in the world. These are silver and gold coins, circa 310 AD, so they'd been in the ground for 100 years, or rather they'd been in circulation for 100 years before they went into the ground. And look at the condition of them. And the coins came from every known Roman coin producing center except Britain. Here they are going across all the way from Syria, right up through Turkey and lower Europe, all the way up through to France, anywhere except Hoxne. There were also hundreds of forged coins, fake coins, and clipped coins. Metal value, nothing. Historical value, priceless. This is a clipped siliquia, or scilia, AD 70 with the Emperor Vespasian on. And you can see that that was clipped. And maybe they clipped it to steal a bit of silver. Maybe they wanted to mark the coin. Some of the gold coins were extremely rare examples of the few coins minted in honor of Nero Caesar. The sale and lending of these coins provides a constant income stream for UK museums. There is the box that is presented in the British Museum display. And the golden jewellery is very important in the hoard. This is the British Museum display as you find it. The golden body chain, unique in the world, forms the main highlight of the British Museum display. I'm sure any woman would want that. It's a gold body chain, it's inset with amethysts and 4 garnets. This is the back clasp of the body chain, solid gold equal to 5 solidii. So that's about 22 grams of solid gold, pretty valuable. This is the top clasp of the golden body chain, and that is a detail of the gold bangles. And this is the Lady Juliana bracelet. Possibly it was a Roman matron. And if you could unwind that and read the inscription, it says, Tire filis dominia Uliana, use this happily, Lady Juliana. Golden necklaces in the Hoxne Hoard. Golden bands, beautiful in perfect condition. Solid gold rings. This is the Empress Piperarium. This is a pepper pot. Unique in the world. There she is in the ground before she came out. So we know that she's actually perfect coming out. And that gives you an idea of the size of the Piperarium held in a human hand. There she is in front and back, and you can see she's in 3 parts. She's made of solid gold and silver interlinked, and it's very, very expensive and very intricate work. There's a detail of her little fingers showing that she's going to tap out the pepper from inside herself. Now, at that time, in 410 AD, when the Piperarium went into the ground, the cost of black pepper then, well, black pepper could only come from India, and it would have cost then about £500 per pound. So most human beings on the planet did not even know that black pepper existed, much less be able to afford it and put it into a golden and silver Piperarium. There are 3 condiment pots always on duty in the display. Sometimes they take one away and lend it out or whatever. And the spices used in those pepper pots would have been salt, pepper, saffron, and paprika. And at the time, you could only have got paprika from Hungary. So that's another indication of the wealth of this family. This is a solid silver tiger jug handle. We don't have the jug, but we do have the handle. Silver and gold inlaid spoons. Solid silver spoons, beautiful. A solid silver gravy ladle, about 14 inches long, totally solid silver in very good condition. Toothpicks, toothpicks, with the Emperor Gratian on them, and we know exactly when he reigned, between 367 and 383 AD. There is the general display as you see it when you come in, and the hoard also contained many iron tools and oddities. These were in perfect condition: pots, awls, scrapers. And there's an indication of some of them as laid out. And they also included hairdressing tools for curling, braiding, and cutting hair for the ladies at that time in 400 AD. So it tells us an awful lot about what the Romans were up to at the time. These are some of the artifacts in both the Hoxne and Mildenhall hoards, and they both share the Chi Rho inscription. Now that tells us an awful lot. That tells us that the Mildenhall treasure was much more certifiably unique and credible than people thought in 1942. Because both of these had the same marks on them. And it shows that they both went into the ground at roughly the same time, 1,500 years ago. In 2014, there was a TV series filmed in Suffolk. It was called The Detectorists, and it's been on Netflix, it's been on the television. And it was all filmed in Framlingham in Suffolk, although they set it in Essex, possibly because they believe more people watch TV in Essex. Don't know. But the premise of it is that two guys go out into a field with their metal detectors, and that premise is 100% credible, because that's exactly what Eric Laws did. At the start of every episode, they walk past this amazing Roman artifact, and that's credible as well, because that's exactly what Eric Laws did. He walked into a field and he found a Roman treasure that had been there for 1,500 years, and loads of people had been there before him. Sales of metal detectors surged worldwide. They went through the roof. And this is Eric, as he's pictured with his famous metal detector on the 29th of May 2011, going back to the primary school he had attended in the 1930s. This is Eric at the Dove Project Luncheon Club, 11th November 2014. I took this picture and I really liked him. I thought he was a lovely man. He was almost blind, he was very deaf, but he liked an awful lot of pepper in his soup. And I said to him once, Eric, did you ever get any money out of that? And he said, I got £850,000, and if they come looking for it, they ain't gonna find it. There he is at home in the beautiful bungalow he built, possibly with the money. And here he is with some members of the Hoxne Heritage Society. And when I did this talk in Bungay, some of these members came to the talk, and there I had the picture right in the talk. It was nice to see them. That's the famous hammer. But what have the Romans ever done for us? Well, since the year 800 AD, we have gradually adopted the Roman system of currency and made it our own. If you look in the Bible, you'll find the term denarii. Now, a denarii is signaled by the letter small d, and that's equal to 1 silver siliquia or scilia. 20 scilia, siliquia, which has a small s, equals 1 libra. And 1 libra, the sign for which is that, equals 1 balance or pound of silver. So we have a pound, a libra, which is equal to 20 scilia or shillings, which is equal to 240 pence. And that's where we get the term LSD from. But I never knew that. I only found that out when I was researching the Hoxne Hoard. And the Roman system of coinage was formally adopted in 1752. At the time, it was based on the Hanoverian German or Easterling measure of silver. That's where we get the word pounds sterling from the word Easterling. Eric Laws found the largest trove of pure golden solidii in the entire world, 569 of them. Eric Laws found the largest trove of pure silver siliquia, or shillings, in the entire world, 14,272 of them. The precious artifacts are considered to be priceless and continue to attract visitors and expert attention from all over the world. The gold and silver from the Hoxne Hoard forms part of the national currency reserves. The treasure disbursement value of the Hoxne Hoard is believed to have realised more than £3.5 million for the museums in the UK without significantly diminishing the inherent value, and this is ongoing. Found, one hammer, priceless. But why was it put down in Hoxne? What had it to do with Hoxne particularly? Why was the burial on Dragon's Green in that burial ground? Was it something to do with the fact that it's 3 miles from Eye? And in the year 410, in Eye, the castle mound would have been the highest point of land visible at the time. And every day the sun would go down over that castle mound, the high point of ground. Possibly that's why they buried the Hoxne treasure where they did. This is a song dedicated to Eric Laws. Mark where the meadow aligns with the mound, silver in sunset and golden the ground. Flee away from the ford, flee, for the river runs dry. Flee away from the ford. Gold in the ground, in the dragon's eye. Gold in the ground, in the dragon's eye. Thank you very much to Eric Laws.
Hello everybody, we've just listened to the main section of our monthly meeting, Tony Diamond's talk about the circumstances surrounding the discovery of the Hoxne Hoard. And that brings us to the official end of our meeting. But if you'd like to stay on for a while, we've put some information together about what life was like in Britain and Suffolk during Roman Britain, which is the time leading up to the burial of the hoard at Hoxne. So you can pause this video now, or at any time during this section, make yourself a cup of tea, come back, sit back and enjoy.
One of the key measures that archaeologists use to track the cycle of peace and war in the ancient world is to look at the frequency of buried coin hoards. Put yourself in the position of a person living in the ancient world. When times are good, you feel secure enough to store your silver coins or your gold jewellery in your home or in the family vault or even in an early form of bank. But when times are bad, you can't risk that. You might bury your silver as an extra precaution, or you do so in a panic when you see the first plumes of black smoke begin to show over the horizon. And in times of mild unrest, people would come back to dig these up again later, once the danger had passed. But if the unrest is serious enough, there might not be anyone left to retrieve it. In that case, the coins remain in the ground with the dates and emperors stamped meticulously on their surface. This is bad news for their owner, of course, but it's good news for archaeologists who want to track a region's history of unrest.
The great advantage of having coins as part of any buried treasure is that invariably a coin either has a date on it or can be dated quite accurately, at the very least matching it to the reign of the person whose head is stamped on it. Such thing as the bust and busts may change in an emperor's reign as he gets older. The legend, the emperor may add to his many titles as his reign progresses. The field, for example, whether there are any mint marks, and the beading, which might change with different issues of the coin. These all help to accurately date the coin and give the earliest time when the treasure was buried. Of the 15,234 coins found in the Hoxne Hoard, the newest coins were issued by Constantine III. He ruled from 407 AD to 411 AD, a very short reign, and the coins were minted in Lyon in France. After being minted, it would have taken a while for the coins to have left Lyon, reached the British shores, and then moved on to Suffolk. The coins were uncirculated, and so the very earliest the Hoxne Hoard could have been buried was in 407 AD. But in reality, it was a little time after this that the coins went into the ground. The date of 407 AD, or a little after this, is very interesting because it's 410 AD that is the date identified as the time when the Romans withdrew from Britain. Now, a whole army of soldiers and other related personnel do not leave a country suddenly. The exodus probably began in 383 AD, initially from Wales and then from Britain, when the troops started to withdraw to defend Rome against the invasion of Alaric the Goth. So in 410 AD, the Romans had mainly left Britain and the Britons were left to manage their own affairs. This was a time when Britain was at its weakest and most open to invasion from other countries. So it's not surprising that it was about this time that any inhabitants of Britain with wealth would have been thinking about burying their wealth until a safer time in the future. By 410 AD, the Picts and the Scots were invading Britain, and the Angles and the Saxons were entering the British shores. At this time, Britain appealed to Emperor Honorius for help. Honorius wrote back telling Britain to look to their own defences. This message to the Britons is often seen as marking the country's end of Roman Britain and the beginning of an independent state under self-rule. After a couple of attempts, the Romans landed and began occupation of Britain in 55 AD and withdrew their occupation in 410 AD. This means that the Romans occupied and governed Britain for a period of 350 years. We can draw parallels with the present day. By issuing the Declaration of Independence in 1776, America claimed independence from Britain and the American War of Independence followed. Thus, in 2021, America has had self-rule for 245 years. That is over 100 years less than the period the Romans occupied Britain. To what extent do you think the present-day American either relates to the way of life in 1776 or regards themselves as British as they would have been before that date? Maybe it was a little similar for people living in Roman Britain in 410 AD. If it was the year 2021 that the Romans withdrew from Britain, and they occupied Britain for 355 years, then they would have entered our shores in 1666, the date of the Great Fire of London. So, how many of us would connect in any way with life around the time of the Great Fire of London, when the population of London was about 350,000? This was in Stuart times, where a decade earlier Britain was still a republic under Cromwell, and men were wearing long wigs like their new king, Charles II. Maybe the same can be said for Britons in 410 AD. Britain was considered to be part of the Roman Empire, so its inhabitants would have been considered to be citizens of Rome. In reality, it seems that if you were affluent, or a retired soldier, or worked for the administration or the army, or had a trade which serviced the Roman infrastructure, then you may well have accepted the Roman culture and be living a Roman way of life. But it also seems that there were many Britons who, given the opportunity, would rebel against the Roman authorities and indeed fight for their independence from their conquerors. It's clear that by 450 AD, the kingdoms of Britain were self-governing and fully independent from Roman rule. Britain was divided into kingdoms, and each kingdom would have had its own king. But the concept of Englishness, or England as one country, would not come until the year 927, 500 years after the Hoxne Hoard was buried, when the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were united by Aethelstan to form the Kingdom of England, or Angleland. In the video which follows, you'll get a glimpse of Roman Britain. It describes the cost of occupying Britain and the difficulty of controlling the province, the decline in the British economy and cities, Romans' gradual withdrawal from the province, which took place over a period of at least 25 years, and the beginning of the development of early medieval Britain. The video also suggests that after the Romans left, writing seems to have disappeared, cities became deserted and fell completely into ruin. The emergence of tribal chiefs and warlords, trade in cities and in ports came to a halt, and overall there was a development of a more violent society.
Britannia had been one of the Roman Empire's most enduring possessions. In London, Rome built an ornate forum and a theatre, enormous public buildings with marble fronts and tiled roofs, unlike anything the Britons had seen before. And each city they built became another hub in the network of roads along which imperial commodities moved. Urban Britons could now enjoy incenses and perfumes, amphoras of wine and red gloss pottery from Gaul, olive oil from Spain along with pepper and spices brought from as far as India. In exchange, Britain supplied precious metals to the Roman world, gold and silver as well as lead and iron. Perhaps most importantly, the shores of Cornwall and Devon were a rich source of tin, a rare metal in the ancient world that was crucial for making bronze. But despite these benefits, Britannia was always a costly possession. Records show that larger amounts of resources were poured into the island than were ever taken out. Part of the cost of holding Britain as a colony was due to its countryside, a hotbed of rebellion. Native Britons lived in small villages of timber, turf-walled roundhouses that dotted the land. And here, tribal loyalties held greater sway than any loyalty people felt to their Roman governors. A rotating cast of governors came and went too. These figures often stayed in their post for only 3 years or so, and none of them were native to Britain. And although we don't have complete records, there's also no evidence of native Britons ever rising to the social rank necessary to govern. So while some Britons might have felt the material benefits of Roman rule, it seems they never really felt part of the shared destiny that bound the rest of the empire together during its height. Perhaps partly for this reason, it seemed the British countryside was only ever one step from anarchy. This threat of rebellion from within was coupled with raids by the Picts and the Meaitae on the walled northern border. And the rich traffic of trade coming to and from Europe also created a booming industry in piracy. Sea-going tribes like the Saxons became increasingly bold, braving the stormy waters of the North Sea to harass shipping, and even make incursions onto the British coast. All of the threats facing it from outside and within meant that the land required the constant presence of an enormous army to defend it. As many as 40,000 soldiers at its height. That's about 1/8 of the entire imperial army, just to put that in perspective. One event would soon lay bare just how far the Roman Empire's power had fallen, and it's remembered to history as the Great Barbarian Conspiracy. To set the scene, we have to imagine the winter of 367, on the Roman garrison at Hadrian's Wall. The winters in this part of the world are harsh. This was the last bastion against the wild tribes of the north, and conditions here were harsh. Letters these soldiers wrote at the time include complaints about the cold that bit at their feet every day, the lack of holidays and not enough beer provided in their rations. But it's still hard to imagine exactly what was behind the decision these men took next. Perhaps it was hunger, cold, or fear. Perhaps they were even bribed. Whatever the reason, the soldiers tasked with defending the empire's northern border mutinied. They changed sides and allowed a waiting army of Picts from Caledonia to cross the wall. This horde swept down on the towns and villages of Northumbria. But before the Romans could send the usual reinforcements to quash this invasion, something astonishing happened. Immediately, waves of tribesmen of the fierce Atticotti from the Outer Isles, Scotti from Ireland and Saxons from Germania began to land on Britain's coasts. At the same time, parties of Franks and Saxons landed on the mainland in northern Gaul. And these didn't seem like random attacks. They seemed to be coordinated raids, like nothing else the so-called barbarian tribes had ever attempted before. They completely overwhelmed the Roman defences. Everywhere, Roman towns burned, cities were sacked, and amid the chaos, slaves escaped, and whole units of soldiers deserted in terror. All of these gathering together into bands that roamed the countryside, resorting to theft and murder to support themselves. These were coordinated, brutal strikes, calculated to cause maximum fear and damage, and they shook the very core of the empire. Britannia's economy had been in decline for decades, with reduced trade to other parts of the empire disrupted by the century of civil wars, by barbarian invasions and piracy on the sea. Pottery produced in Britain began to drastically reduce in variety and decoration around this time, and iron production in the south plummeted. Whole kilns were abandoned and the price of iron skyrocketed. Around the year 350, the Roman sewers in Canterbury started clogging up, and no one bothered to clear them. A thick layer of silt also began to build up in the public baths that everywhere stood as a symbol of Roman civilization. This decline was beginning to seep into every aspect of British life, but in the year 378, Rome would suffer a horrifying blow. The Emperor Valens, who ruled over the eastern portion of the empire, had brought a massive army of 30,000 men to crush a rebellion of Goths and Huns barely more than 10,000 strong. Confident in his coming victory, the Emperor Valens attacked them without waiting for reinforcements. These Goth rebels stood and fought, and astonishingly, they won. The Emperor Valens was killed along with 20,000 of his men, and his body was never recovered. This loss shook Rome to the core. Barbarian armies were now causing havoc across Rome's eastern territories, flouting the authority of the empire. And Maximus had also taxed Britain brutally to pay for his wars. Now rebellions spread like a fire through dry heather. The date of Maximus's departure, 383, is the last date ever to be found on a Roman coin in Wales. It's the last date, too, for any archaeological trace in the northern Pennine Hills. In these places, it marked the end of Roman rule in Britain. After this time, British coffins stopped being sealed with nails, and boots lost their hobnails. This shows how expensive iron had become. British people now slipped on icy ground and rotted in flimsy coffins. Pottery became a lost art, and the suburbs of the cities began to empty. For Rome, enough was enough. The province of Britannia wasn't worth it. The empire was now so weakened that an army of Goths led by Alaric was now rampaging around northern Italy, and even sacked Rome itself, the first time a foreign power had done this for 800 years. The collapse of the entire empire now seemed like a possibility, and in 410 AD, the Emperor Honorius finally declared the end of the official Roman presence in Britain. He famously told the British to look to their own defences. Rome withdrew all remaining soldiers and administrators from Britain. They stopped collecting taxes in the province, and this released some of the burden on its people initially. But they also stopped paying the administrators who ran its cities and managed its trade routes, and they ended the wages and supplies flowing to the local soldiers who had fought as auxiliaries in the garrison. These men didn't go anywhere. Instead, they began to tax the populations themselves, demanding money and supplies in exchange for protection. These groups would ultimately grow into the basis of very early medieval society. These warlords frequently fought their wars using the services of mercenary armies from the continent. Jutes from Denmark, Angles and Saxons from northern Germany, men who brought their families and formed the first Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in Britain. The people forgot Latin as an everyday language, and it survived only in the churches. They stopped writing as far as we can tell, since no texts have survived. And people forgot their Roman identities too, adopting the cultures of the incoming peoples. And while this great social and cultural change happened, Britain's Roman cities fell gradually into ruins. Bit by bit, the great opulent villas that had once dominated the countryside were abandoned and became dilapidated. In the north of Britain, Hadrian's Wall was finally abandoned, and it seems the soldiers in its forts left in a hurry. At one of the most well-preserved sites, an auxiliary fort called Vindolanda, archaeologists have found Roman cavalry swords simply abandoned, dropped on the ground and left there. These are very rare finds, since in this time a sword was an expensive and precious object. One day, it seems, everyone at Vindolanda just got up and left. Meanwhile, tribal chieftains and local warlords, some of whom had been officers in the Roman army until recently, moved into the forts along the wall and used them as private castles. In one fort known as Birdoswald, it seems the descendants of the original garrison still lived there a century after the departure of Rome, passing down their uniforms, flying regimental insignia, and building timber constructions inside its crumbling ruin. They probably received pay and supplies from people living in the area in exchange for protection, and they maintained a kind of Roman identity in order to increase their legitimacy. To the south, large cities like London fell gradually into disrepair. Trade at London's port had been slowing over the past century, but now it finally stopped altogether. Its suburbs turned into wasteland, or were tilled for farming. London's great Roman Forum, too, was dismantled and quarried for stone, and its public bath was torn down. Its great basilica, which was once the largest building in northwest Europe, was also taken apart. People began to be buried inside the city limits, something the Roman authorities would never have allowed. And of these burials, studies show that 4 times more have been found with wounds from stabbing and slicing weapons than in the previous period. London's population of nearly 30,000 people began to drift away, back to a simpler existence in the countryside, to timber longhouses and roundhouses built of thatch and wattle. By the end of the 4th century, everything south of the River Thames had been abandoned. Large pockets of London's urban fabric had turned into patches of overgrown wasteland, and people began to grow wheat in the middle of the city. By the end of the 5th century, London was deserted. But without their links to the Roman economy, the slow death of Britain's cities was all but assured. By the early 5th century, all of Britain's towns, large and small, simply ceased to exist.
East Anglia, like other areas, was at first controlled by a strategic network of Roman roads and forts. Codnham and Long Melford had Roman strongholds. The 2 main north-south roads of Roman Suffolk were certainly military in origin. The first of the roads, known as Pye Street, is basically the Ipswich-Norwich road of today. Partly sharing the A140, it ran from the capital of the Iceni at Caister St Edmund near Norwich to the original Roman provincial capital, Colchester. It is believed that Pye Street got its name from the Magpie Inn at Stonham-Parva, which, as you know, is just outside Stowmarket. The Magpie is known locally as the Stonham Pie. Incidentally, you can see in the picture both the Magpie pub and the gallows spanning the road. It is believed that this was used as a gibbet for hanging highwaymen. A little way further down the road towards Stowmarket is a pub called the Highwayman. The other Roman road was the Peddar's Way, which links Melford, Ixworth and Nettishall. It eventually makes its way up to Hunstanton, which was an important Roman port. The Peddar's Way is an ancient trackway which the Romans remodelled into a Roman road. Melford in particular was a prominent Roman town, and there was a Roman fort at Ixworth, a Roman fort of 7 acres at Pakenham, where the Peddar's Way crossed the River Blackbourne. 400 miles of Roman roads still stand out on the modern map of Suffolk. For example, the A1120 from Petter to Peasenhall is noticeably straight for about 12 miles in an area of otherwise very winding lanes, and was part of a Roman road which ran from the Gipping Valley to the east coast near Dunwich. Nearly all the Roman roads were major routes linking important settlements. One thing that does denote an Anglo-Saxon presence in Suffolk is the dominance of Anglo-Saxon place names, which often includes the name of the head man of the settlement. Last month we looked at some of the village names in Suffolk and their somewhat strange pronunciations. For example, we looked at the phonetically sounding village of Wenhaston, which has the pronunciation of Wenhaston. A ton means an enclosed village, farmstead or manor, and the Saxon that the settlement was named after was Wenith, and so it became known as Wenithston. So it's not surprising, however it ended up being spelt, to be pronounced Wenhaston. And do you remember Petter? A haga was an enclosure, and the name of the Saxon that the settlement was named after was Petter. So again, although the spelling became corrupted over time, the name Petter continued to be used and pronounced in the Saxon way. And Monden. A den was a pasture, usually for pigs, and the Saxon after the village was named was Munda. So, as Munderston, over time you can see how it quite easily can be shortened to Munden. Hoxne is slightly different. The parish of Hoxne is described as irregularly shaped, covering the villages of Hoxne Cross Street and Heckfield Green, with a tongue extending southwards to take in part of the former RAF Horham airfield. This tongue is also called a spur, and so Hoxne, being situated on a spur of land, is in the shape that looks like the hock of a horse, its hamstring, or its hock shin. And from hock shin we get Hoxne.
Thank you to Tony and Keith for their presentations, and thank you for joining us. Next month our speaker is Tony Nearbard, and she specialises in tracing family history. She will tell us how she traced one of her ancestors, the problems she encountered, and the hidden story behind the facts in Don't Eat the Cabin Boy. We hope to see you next month. Bye.